The PlayStation TV, or PlayStation Vita TV as it is called in Japan, where it was first released in 2013, is the protagonist of this episode. Is it still worth buying in 2023? What are its features and functionalities? All of these and even more. Welcome to the third episode of this series. In previous episodes we talked extensively about both PlayStation Vita models, so it's time to include PlayStation TV, an important piece of Sony's lineup of the time. Let's get started. An unboxing is worth 1,000 words. Or so they say, no? The PlayStation TV we're going to unbox today is the VTE 1016. Here we can immediately notice some important information. The console has 1GB of internal storage, and for its use a USB cable and a DualShock 3 or a DualShock 4 are required, which are not included in this package. In case you didn't know, at the time some units were sold in a larger package, bundled with a PS3 controller and a proprietary 8GB external memory card. Definitely a more complete version. Continuing, if it were not already clear from the various images, the console inside is black, but I want to clarify that this device also exists in white. Just a little spoiler about the package contents: the PlayStation TV, an HDMI cable, a power supply, a cable for the power supply, informative material, and a voucher, which as described on the front of the box allows the download of 3 PS Vita games, worth over 30 euros. Unfortunately, the voucher is not present in the box in my possession, and the reason is very simple. I bought this PlayStation TV used for only 40 euros, and the previous owner must rightly have used it. The 3 games that can be downloaded via the code are Worms Revolution Extreme, Velocity Ultra, and Olli Olli. Looking at this very modestly sized box and knowing its contents, we can already begin to realize how compact this interesting console is. On the left side we can see illustrated one of the main features of the PlayStation TV, streaming from PS4. Finally, on the back we have information that at first glance does not seem of great importance, but behind it lies perhaps the biggest problem of the console itself. PlayStation TV is the compact, elegant and simple to use microsystem that allows you to stream PS4 games on another HD TV and plays PS Vita, PSP and PS1 compatible games on your TV. And again, a little further below we find play compatible PS Vita, PSP and PS1 titles on your TV. If you now understand what I was referring to when I said the biggest problem of the console itself, leave a comment down below. Otherwise, don't worry, we'll talk about it in a bit. The time has finally come to open this box. Inside the box we find another box, this time a white one, very similar to the one we saw in the first episode with the unboxing of the Vita Slim. Opening it, we are greeted by the console, which rests inside a protective sleeve. But for the moment, let's put it aside and continue with the unboxing. We therefore find an HDMI cable, simple but essential. We continue with the cable that connects to the power supply and end with the power supply itself, which unfortunately, unlike the one included with the PlayStation Vita, does not have both removable cables. Probably because not being a portable console, being able to break down the power supply system to facilitate transport is not so important. A choice, however, in my opinion, rather unfortunate from the point of view of repairability, as well as that of preferring this 4mm barrel plug rather than a, at the time, very common micro USB. However, this type of connector has its positive side, which is the ease of insertion, since unlike the micro USB, it does not require a specific positioning. And finally, let's take a look at this particular device. The design is very simple and clean, minimalistic, I would say. I really like this matte black, which helps to hide the presence of fingerprints and dust pretty well. A choice that makes you think, given that for its portable counterpart, PlayStation Vita, obviously subject to continuous contact, a glossy black was chosen. Terrible to keep clean. How beautiful a matte black Vita would be. I'm not the only one who thinks that, am I? Right? The plastic used to detach seems of excellent quality, even if it has some visible marks left by the previous owner. At the moment, it is not possible for me to evaluate whether it is the plastic that scratches easily or if this person treated it poorly. If any of you have been using a PlayStation TV since day one, let me know in which condition it is in the comments down below. Let's take a look at the console in a little more detail. The dimensions, as it is already clear, are really contained, as well as the weight, with only 110 grams. However, it gives the feeling of a solid object. Here on the matte black top, we only find a PlayStation logo, of which I really appreciate the minimal aspect, with this contrast in glossy black. On the left side we find nothing, while on the right, protected by a flap, we have the slot for PS Vita game cards. On the glossy black front we can see the Sony logo and an LED which acts as a simple power indicator. In the lower part we find some logos, features and serial numbers. Let's take a look at the back, the most important from a functional point of view. Here we find the on and off button, slightly raised and therefore easy to locate, the slot for the external proprietary memory card, essential since the console has, as already mentioned, 1 GB of internal storage only. A USB 2.0 port, originally designed for a simple wired connection for the controller, becomes extremely useful in case of modding for connecting to an external hard drive, to be used as an easy, large and cheap main storage solution for games and other content. We continue with the port that many of us would have liked to see on the PlayStation Vita, the HDMI port, through which the console is able to transmit at a resolution of 480p, 720p and 1080i. I am positively surprised by the presence of an Ethernet port in such a compact console, probably added to ensure maximum stability when streaming from PS4. And finally, we find this very simple port that makes it possible to power this nice little device, capable of consuming approximately a maximum of 2.8 watts. Let's skip the initial configuration, since there isn't much to see. It's very simple. I also want to point out that even if I occasionally make some reference to modding, my PlayStation TV is completely original. The system software is practically identical to the one on the PlayStation Vita, which I have already roughly illustrated in the first episode, so I won't be boring you here by repeating the same things. After all, PlayStation TV is nothing more than a stripped-down PlayStation Vita, with a few small additions such as HDMI, USB and Ethernet ports, so it's totally understandable that their operating system is the same. The possibility of using a controller is certainly a novelty, as it is impossible on an unmodded Vita. The connection procedure is the same for both DualShock 3 and 4. Just use the cable to register the device, then it becomes perfectly usable via Bluetooth. I recommend using the DualShock 4, not only because it is more modern, but above all due to the presence of a touchpad, which is very convenient in titles that require the use of touch as an input. And here I take this opportunity to return to the discussion we started during the unboxing, perhaps the PlayStation TV biggest problem. On the box, when talking about games, the word compatible is used several times. This means that unfortunately there are PlayStation Vita games that are not compatible with the PlayStation Vita TV, and there are more than a few, a detail that is not reassuring at all. Furthermore, as if that was not enough, the problem also expands to the PSP library, although with less of an impact. Unfortunately, we can also find some compatibility issues inside the PS1 library. If you are curious, online you can find several rather large lists with all tested, compatible and non-compatible titles. This big compatibility issue in the PlayStation Vita library library specifically is mainly due to the lack of the touch controls present on the Vita, both on the front and on the back. In some games, developers have found alternative methods to mitigate this lack of hardware, with a simulated interface managed via analog sticks or using the DualShock 4 touchpad. However, for some reason, not everyone has done this adaptation work. In some cases, there may have been some technical limitations. In others, it may have been a matter of convenience. Let's say PlayStation TV was not an extremely popular console. Furthermore, some titles may have been made incompatible on purpose to avoid that with a single copy of a PS Vita title, the user could also play on the big screen, ruining the sales of the PS3 and PS4 version, for example. But these are only my guesses. What do you guys think? As for the PSP library, on the other hand, we can assume there was some problems in terms of communication between Sony and some developers, or it may have been simply laziness. Fortunately, thanks to the wonderful community surrounding the PlayStation Vita, through modding, the compatibility issue on the PlayStation TV has been solved in almost every title available. If you've never used a PlayStation TV before and you're worried that PlayStation Vita titles won't perform well on the big screen, I want to reassure you right away. Used to seeing them on a 5-inch screen, I expected some loss in the graphic department. Instead, I was positively impressed with the quality of the images. The titles I've tested are pretty well defined. It must be said that I do not play on a 50-inch TV. I use a simple 24-inch Full HD display, but in my experience, I can only confirm clear and well reproduced images. Let's briefly talk about a feature that Sony at the time with PlayStation TV, in my opinion, focused a lot on: streaming from PlayStation 4. In 2023, we are now very well used to the concept of streaming. Whether it is run from the console through a simple application or from some server thanks to some paid service, streaming has become something we now take for granted. In 2013, however, the situation was slightly different, especially on consoles. Being able to start playing, for example, on the TV in the living room and then continue the same game streamed on the TV in the bedroom was a relatively new and interesting thing. However, this functionality was not enough in making the PlayStation TV a desirable console. The general reception was in fact not the best. The comparison with other devices dedicated to streaming content such as the Apple TV or the Chromecast was very frequent. In my opinion, at the time, in the eyes of many, this streaming feature detracted from the gaming capabilities of the PlayStation TV itself. After all, I cannot blame people who didn't believe much in the PlayStation TV, since as we have already seen, unfortunately, for one reason or another, many titles, especially those belonging to the PlayStation Vita library, are not compatible. Let's say that the idea of having a dedicated device for gaming via streaming wasn't bad at all. Valve, for example, later in 2015 released the Steam Link, which is a device with a rather similar concept, but PlayStation TV, in my opinion, had the possibility of being much more than what it was, and we'll talk about this later in the conclusions. Now that we know the PlayStation TV a little better, we can finally ask ourselves perhaps the most important question: is it worth buying in 2023? The answer is similar to that seen in the first episode dedicated to the PlayStation Vita. It depends on what kind of person you are and the price at which you are able to find it. Let's say that under the €50 threshold, I recommend the purchase to any person who has even a minimum interest in the gaming world. Beyond that figure, however, things get complicated. To simplify, we can divide possible buyers into two broad categories: the collector and the gamer. Obviously, belonging to one category does not automatically exclude the other. For a collector interested in the PlayStation world, the situation is simpler. It is in its nature to try to get every single device or game title, and the price often doesn't even matter. So, as a collector and a gamer, I would recommend the purchase to anyone who collects like me, but still trying to opt for the second-hand market and find a PlayStation TV at a reasonable price. After all, in 2023, by taking a look at various websites, you will still find many good deals, even complete with boxes and accessories. Furthermore, being a non-portable console, unlike the PlayStation Vita, it is subject to less wear, and therefore it will be easier to find one in excellent condition, satisfying even the most demanding collectors. The situation becomes terribly complicated for the gamer who has no interest in collecting, and here I would like to divide into two subcategories: the gamer who modifies his consoles and the one who keeps them original at all costs. If you are a gamer who is not interested in modding the PlayStation Vita and want to be able to play on the big screen, PlayStation TV is currently the only option available, unless you want to rely on some Windows, Linux or Android emulator, with all the added incompatibilities and problems. Obviously, if you choose to rely on an unmodded PlayStation TV, make sure that the games you are interested in are compatible. Let's say that even for this category, in the end I recommend buying it, perhaps keeping the cost as low as possible by buying one without a box, for example. If, on the other hand, you are part of that group of gamers who don't mind modifying their consoles, well, I'd say you could easily pretend that the PlayStation TV doesn't exist. In fact, by modding a PlayStation Vita, you can use various controllers and connect it to any TV or monitor without any kind of limitation. With a modded Vita, you will get the best of both worlds in one beautiful device. Of course, if you find an extremely cheap PlayStation TV, it might be nice to have a modded one always ready in the setup, connected to a huge hard drive with thousands of titles available. But at this point, all of this has become just an extremely personal choice, and I can't wait to know what do you guys think in the comments down below. In conclusion, despite its very simple appearance, PlayStation TV is an extremely interesting console. Its small size allows it to be placed almost anywhere. If you don't have much space or you want the most minimalist result possible, you can easily hide it behind the monitor or TV, making it practically invisible. Even today, it is a very enjoyable console to use. PlayStation Vita titles performs well. With 1080i video output, everything looks pretty well defined. As it happened on the PlayStation Vita, also here on the PlayStation TV, modding managed in some way to unlock the maximum of its potential. With the addition of a handy hard drive, this tiny console will always be there, ready to give you countless hours of entertainment from the PS Vita, PSP, PS1 libraries and many more. Unfortunately, and here I want to go back to what I was saying earlier, the PlayStation TV, in my opinion, could have been a lot more than what it was. At the time, from my point of view, PlayStation TV was excessively thought as some kind of PS4 extension, in some way limiting its capabilities with its heavily advertised streaming functionality, when instead it should have been designed to become PlayStation Vita's inseparable companion. Of course, I would have preferred PS Vita to have its own video output, but if we have to have two separate devices, PlayStation TV should really enter into symbiosis with its portable counterpart, perhaps when necessary even becoming a practical dock with video output, Ethernet port and an external hard drive. Does all of this remind you of any other more recent and successful console? Yes, the concept is very similar. Unfortunately, at the time, Sony was so close to the ideal gaming system of this type, but in a different, less efficient way. With a completely original PlayStation Vita, you can play wherever you want, and then go back home and continue the same game on the PlayStation TV, as long as the game is compatible. To do this, we have two options. The first one requires the transfer of the game card and the memory card from PS Vita to PS TV, in order to move both the game and the saves from one console to another. After a few seconds of database rebuilding, the game will be available as you've previously left it. The second option, on the other hand, is limited to PlayStation Plus subscribers, since in this case you are going to take advantage of the cloud save storage service. Once you've closed the game, from the start menu you can upload the save file. Then, once the game card has been transferred from one device to another, simply download the most recent save data from the same menu and finally continue the game. These options undoubtedly works, but they're both much more inconvenient than simply connecting the console to an hypothetical very simple dock equipped with a video output. PlayStation TV is far from perfect, but it is still a piece of history in the gaming world. Excellent for collectors, but not only. Gamers can enjoy a good number of titles on the big screen, and modders can, without too much difficulty, transform it into a beautiful, minimalist retro gaming console. I hope you enjoyed this video and that somehow it helped you understand better this particular device. Let me know in the comments down below if you already have your own PlayStation TV or if you are still searching for the right deal. And please subscribe to this channel to not miss the next episodes. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.